Okay, I just want to talk about what goes into making a good research paper. Choosing a proper subject. Again, that should be due, I believe, Monday night, your opening paragraph. And again, choose from one of those list of topics that I have. I have in Blackboard possible topics, or choose one yourself if you want, but it's got to be passed by me to make sure it is an economic project. But it's a lot easier if you find something you might be interested in. So again, the opening paragraph, you should look at the opposing themes of the basically any issue you're looking at. Again, if you look at gender equality, which is a common one that people choose, women theoretically get 70 cents of a dollar that a man earns at similar jobs. Should that be rectified through government action or not? So you want to look at it as through an activist and non-activist roles. Two sides of the argument. And for an activist, if we go to Senator Bernie Sanders, who's running for president, and he's got a web page, and he's got an issues page here, and he talks about basically some of the things um, that he is in favor of government getting involved in. And one of them is the fighting for women's rights. And he also has climate change, decent wage, again, wealth inequality. These are all good topics for papers. Um, but if you look at fighting for women's rights, and again, if I scroll down, he's got a lot of stuff down here, but this is something you really have to mention if you do this one, the Paycheck Fairness Act. It's a bill that Democrats have been trying to pass in Congress for years, but the Republicans have been blocking it. And basically, it has a bunch of extra laws and regulations for businesses that they have to follow to help women earn as much as men. Again, he's got a nice little graph here showing the difference in pay scales. So he's very activist. You can look at his other issues, Senator Sanders. A non-activist be somebody like Marco Rubio, who's running as a Republican, a conservative. Here's this a quick link to what he does will help stand up for small business owners, because what he's looking for is getting government off the back of small businesses. So he's got a classic line here in the beginning, entrepreneurs and family business owners need to be free from overbearing government policies to grow and create, right? This is, again, one of the reasons a lot of Republicans are against the Paycheck Fairness Act. So if you look down below here, some of the things he wants to do, he talks about regulatory policies, right? There's, basically let Congress vote up or down on regulations that have a major impact on the economy, right? Expose the true costs of regulations on American economy and small businesses. If you're doing the climate change as a paper topic, and he's talking about not worrying about CO2 emissions, but basically fighting more controls over the again, carbon tax, carbon emissions. So basically, he wants to have more energy, cheaper energy, because again, of course, that makes it cheaper for businesses. It keeps their costs down. So again, any issue can be looked at through this activist, non-activist role, basically a Republican versus Democrat, liberal versus conservative. But your opening paragraphs would just state the theme of the argument, and because both have a point, and what you have to do is figure out who has the better point. And you do that by basically researching your topic. Again, the easiest way to start is through newspaper articles or other easy to read articles on the subject matter. Again, newspaper articles are nice. They're fairly easy to read. Newspapers are written at a low level, so generally easy to understand. And if you go to the LIM databases, there is the newspapers in ProQuest to search on. Opposing views, points in context. Again, this is another LIM database that we have. CQ Researcher, this is the Congressional Quarterly Researcher. This is a function of Congress that actually does research papers all the time. And it's written for members of Congress, so it's, again, not written in the most difficult language. But these will give you an idea of what's going on with the issue. You don't use all of these in your paper, but basically it gives you an idea of what's going on. So it's just how you get started with these things. And then, Google News also, I guess, is another great place to just find some quick information. And when you look at these newspapers, again, especially in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, if they're looking at an issue a lot of times like gender equality, they will cite studies in the newspaper article that that talks about a lot of fact finding that's been done. You should go to those particular um, studies and look for them directly. That would always help in the paper. Again, the first thing I do when I look at one of these research papers is I look in the back and see what the table of contents is like. And you can generally see how good the paper is going to be by the quality of the table of contents. Excuse me, or the works cited page. And again, creating an outline is always a good idea. I'll be going over this in class, how to do it. And again, activist, what data you need to bring up the activist side of the argument. The non-activist, what data is needed for that too. And again, just think to yourself, what do I want to look for? What kind of information might be helpful? And then when you're looking for specific primary data, again, the US Census Bureau is a great place. The Bureau of Labor Statistics also, the Commerce Department. Again, if you Google these terms, you'll basically find their websites quickly. And then you can search in these websites for information. And again, just ask me if you have problem finding data, right? I can do it pretty quickly. So once you get some raw data, again, it's always a good idea to look at some academic papers, maybe some from a think tank or some different government studies. Again, ProQuest, there's a good place to find academic papers. Think tanks, again, these are organizations where they hire people to basically write research papers all the time. There's a whole bunch of them, and if I look at the last page here of this, if I can find it, there's the last page, second to last page. Here's a list of all of these different think tanks. Again, conservative ones, centrist ones, liberal ones, libertarian ones. Again, the Cato Institute's a good one for a very, generally, they're a non-activist kind of role. Liberal, again, the Center for Economic Policy Research is a good one too. So if you look at some of these different think tanks, they write papers too. And they're generally a good source sometimes for different ideas. So, oops, hang on, let me go back. Out of control. So again, once you, find the primary sources and go through some of these different research academic papers and think tank papers, you want to come up with your conclusion. Which one do you think is the best, right? The activist approach, should government get involved? Are you like Bernie Sanders, who thinks that government has a role to play to fix these flaws in the free market? Again, a flaw of the free market is women are discriminated against just because they're women. And should government do something, right? Like Norway has actually legislated it. So if you're a public company and you have a board of directors, which they all have to have, a certain percent have to be women, right? It's the law in Norway. Hasn't really worked out that well for helping women get ahead in managerial positions and other positions in that company, those companies, but it's an interesting way of approaching the subject, a very activist way of looking at it. Or are you more of a non-activist? So we should really help businesses, right? Create jobs. Government gets basically is trouble for businesses. It just takes up too much time. They have to deal with regulatory policies, more government conditions. It's not worth it. So look at both sides, make a policy recommendation. And I got my last page here. Yeah, use terms and descriptions from the textbook, right? I'll be talking about this in the classroom, but again, if you do gender equality, I would go to that chapter on labor and use some of the terms that are used in that chapter. I believe that's chapter 9. I could be wrong. So we will be talking about this in class, but this is useful for, again, some of these links for some of these think tanks. It's maybe entertaining to peruse these ones and see what they've got. With the Ayn Rand Institute, let me take a look. Or Ayn Rand, however you pronounce her name. She was a novelist, as a philosopher, again, very much into unleashing human creativity. She's been dead for a while. But I wonder what they got here. But anyway, things you should look at. I'm going to have to look at this later. But email me if you have any questions.